Thank you for joining us today. I'm State Representative Samantha Vang from Brooklyn Center. Although this is a United Black Caucus and a Posse Caucus presser, and I hold the name as chair of the Posse Caucus, I'm not coming today as the chair, but first and foremost to represent my district as Brooklyn Center State Representative and to protect my constituents as we are going through turmoil within the city. I want to center the pain and hurt I'm hearing from my city. We are still grieving the loss of our neighbor, friend, and community member, Daunte Wright. We are hurt to see the businesses, places where we run our daily errands and activity be boarded, trashed, and damaged. The ongoing military presence and curfews intended to keep us safe also has the consequence of continuing to stress our community. To hear speeding cars, random gunshots, firecrackers, and canyons of tear gas is frightening. We are all working to process how we will move forward, seeking justice, especially after the recent firing of the Brooklyn Center city manager. Dante's mother has expressed how he was an amazing and loving sibling, uncle, son, and father with a big heart full of potential. He loved basketball and had a smile that would light up a room. We are mourning the loss of a young father who was still a kid in so many ways. He was a good kid who did not deserve any of what happened to him. We will fight for justice for Dante and to change our broken system, which continuously puts Black men in danger. Uh, Chair Carlos Mariani, Chair of the Public Safety, is unable to join us today due to um, being under the weather. So I will pass it on to my colleague, friend, and Vice Chair, Representative Fraser.
Thank you, Rep. Rang. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Rep. Rang, again, thank you for sharing that important perspective and those thoughts from your city. Let me say this plainly. First, I am Representative Cedric Fraser, District 45A, which covers the cities of New Hope, Plymouth, and Crystal. And I live just 10 minutes away from where Dante lost his life, very close to my community. So let me say this plainly. The reason we have to say Black Lives Matters is because they certainly don't appear to matter enough to the GOP leaders in the Senate to hear a single bill that will protect Black lives. We have to insist Black Lives Matter because after another life is lost, we hear from Senator Lommer, the legislator who worked to weaken reforms last year, that those weakened reforms were enough, were not enough. We have to insist Black Lives Matter because they don't matter enough to the three major law enforcement associations for them to come together and endorse a single police reform bill we put forth this year, including a bill I carried to ban white supremacy in policing. We have to insist Black Lives Matter because Senator Gazelka, the head of the Senate, refused to alter the statute of limitations bill. It's okay to say Black Lives Matters, but words without action are hollow or duplicitous, as they intend to hide how little our lives actually matter. Saying the phrase Black Lives Matter does not equate to the action that needs to be taken for us to actually put laws and policies in place to prevent another killing, build community trust, and provide for accountability. The lack of action by Senator Gazelka and Senator Lommer does not show that they believe Black Lives Matter. But we understand that we cannot depend on the Senate to help bring the type of necessary change that we need. That is why the DFL has held 10 hearings on the police reform and accountability issues this session, and a total of 21 over the biennium. Yesterday, we were pleased to hear Governor Walz step up to voice his support for further hearings on police accountability bills as we move closer to the end of this session. The call and sense of urgency was welcomed, and we are working and we're looking forward to the governor using his executive authority and influence to help us move forward. The lack of action by Senator Gazelka and Senator Lommer does not show that they believe Black Lives Matter. And we really want to impress upon that because that is why we are here now. The continued barriers are the reason we are here now. And we cannot legislate in a manner in which we only have urgency every time we lose another Black life. We cannot legislate in that manner. We currently have bills moving through the House that will strengthen the police officer misconduct database, that will allow local units of government to establish civilian oversight councils and fund community organizations working to prevent crime in their communities while addressing the need for community healing after a traumatic event. We have new limits on the use of no-knock warrants. We will prohibit altering or destroying body cam footage, requiring footage to be shared with family no more than 48 hours after deadly force incident, and prohibiting withholding of footage. We require model policing on response to public assemblies. And we also are requiring the post board to prioritize the goal of promoting public safety, including the promotion of human rights, maintaining the basic rights, freedoms, and privileges that belong to every person, including the right to dignity, fairness, equality, respect, and freedom from discrimination. These bills will help to continue moving us forward to a public safety system that will value the human rights and dignity of all Minnesotans, but specifically our Black Minnesotans. Thank you all, and we will open up for any questions that you may have.
If you have a question, either raise your hand or please enter it in the chat. If you have a question, we'll let you speak here. Okay. First up, we have Ricardo Lopez.
Hi, yes. The press release just came in as this press conference was started, but Senator Gazelka has announced that the Senate will be holding hearings on police accountability measures. So just wanted to, ask whether you had a heads up that that was happening, and just your reaction to the potential for hearings being held in the Senate in light of everything that's happened this week.
Thank you for that question. I did not know that that is happening. I don't believe anyone in this press conference has had the heads up. They may have had the heads up about the comments that we were going to make, but that is welcome news to hear that they will now be taking the actions that they need to take, that they should have taken this entire session. So that's welcome news. We're glad to hear that, and we're glad to engage in the conversation to make sure that we can pass some bills that will have a real meaningful change.
If I could follow up, I think earlier you had mentioned that some of the police reforms that were adopted last summer after George Floyd, Senate Republicans sought to water them down. What specifically did you mean by that? And just hearing that, does that give you any confidence that holding hearings now will make any material difference in the efforts to hold police accountable?
I'll take that. I hope that it's been a little over a year now since we lost Mr. Floyd, and I hope that with us losing another Black life, that it will create some urgency, that we will actually pass some laws with some real lasting impact and cause some real change in our public safety system. I believe the use of excessive force, or the use of force, was one bill that was not as strong as it could have been, and that is possibly something that could have helped in a situation with the most recent case with Daunte losing his life. So I hope that the Senate Republicans take this serious. It's a very serious matter. We are tired, very tired of losing Black lives. It's been a traumatic experience for our communities. We're continuing to grieve together. We're still dealing with the trauma of reliving George Floyd's killing. And so I hope that they take all these things into consideration, and take us serious, and pass legislation that truly shows that Black lives matter.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Bill Werner.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. The Republicans in the Senate it looks like they're going to hold hearings. We don't exactly know what bills yet, or if they will have any bills. However, they will say that there was an impediment put in this process by some Democrats in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I'm talking about the SAFE legislation, and that it's also Democrats' responsibility to get their members on board and get this whole thing rolling. That Republicans in the minority in the House shouldn't have to put up the votes to pass something that Democrats are pushing for. So, how do you get those particular group of lawmakers in the Minnesota House, Democrats who are reluctant to pass police reform legislation? How do you get them in your court?
Just let me say this: the safe account there was not one GOP member that voted for that bill. I absolutely understand why some of the Democratic members did not vote for that. There were accountability measures that were asked to be removed from that bill that were very important. Important to me, important to other DFL members, should be important to everyone in the state. Those accountability measures were specific to dealing with First Amendment assembly rights If those accountability measures were left in that bill, if that bill had passed, we may not have had the engagement that law enforcement had with the tear gas incidents we've seen in the last couple of days with peaceful protesters in Brooklyn Center. So what I say to that is that if we want true reform, it's going to take everyone in the House and in the Senate. And that requires also for GOP members to also get on board and vote for real change. And they could have done that, and they chose not to do that. And that was a bill that was largely supported by law enforcement, and they chose not to provide that funding for law enforcement.
Well, Representative, what do you say to some of your Democratic members, however, who are reluctant to get on board for various reasons? You know, we can speculate about motivations, but what would you say to them to also join the group that you were saying Republicans need to join as well?
I would say just pretty plainly is that I understand that we all have different sets of constituencies, and we represent those constituencies, and I can appreciate the position they're in, that they have to represent their constituencies. And like I said, there were situations where we had to remove accountability measures from that bill, and that was something that members were not able to get on board with, and I understand that. I'm hoping that as we're moving forward with a sense of urgency after the killing of Mr. Wright, that we don't have to deal with that. That we understand that we need to have accountability in every single bill. It needs to be threaded throughout every single bill that we have dealing with any type of public safety issue. And I believe if that is the case, we will have everyone on board.
Thanks, Representative.
Next up, we have Mary Lommer.
Yeah, representatives, I'm wondering if there's interest in changing what police can pull people over for. We now really know by anecdote and even evidence, if you look at the life of Philando Castile, he was pulled over 49 times in 13 years. I'm hearing some interest, even bipartisan interest, in really changing the severity of the offense, which somebody can be pulled over for. What's going on legislatively on that?
I can take that one. So as folks know, I'm the chair of the Judiciary Committee. I have been working with Representative Frazier as well as Vice Chair Kelly Moeller on language that we will be sending out as soon as it's available regarding just that issue and whether folks can be pulled over for things that aren't related at all to public safety and some of those minor traffic infractions that are often used as a reason to instigate police interacting with drivers. We will be holding a public informational hearing tomorrow in the House Judiciary Committee as part of the other police accountability bills that we already had scheduled in my committee, and that starts at 1 p.m. tomorrow and will be live streamed as all other House committees have been this session.
And Representative, if I could follow up with you, have you had any contact with Chair Lommer, and do you know what the Senate's hearing and what bills you would like them to hear?
I have not. Obviously, I'm the Judiciary Chair. There's some overlap, but not everything. And that's Chair Mariani's jurisdiction. But I don't know if Vice Chair Frazier may have anything to add to that.
I can say that Chair Mariani has been in touch with Senator Lommer, and I would say that to this point, and until we just recently heard that they're going to have hearings, every bill that we've had has been rejected, and there has not been a hearing on.
And are there, Representative Frazier, bills that you think are must do's if there's a priority list in what the Senate does here?
I think there are some bills that must be done. I think there is a bill that specifically deals with the early warning system, the early warning detection system that Post Board is tasked with putting in place. There's an issue around the data. We have a bill in place to fix that data piece to allow them to get the information that they need for the early warning system. I think that bill needs to be done.
Thank you.
Next up, Kevin Featherly.
Thank you. So there's this hearing coming up, but I'm wondering if it's necessary. We've already seen the Senate Judiciary Committee, Public Safety Committee, hear its bill. We saw amendments for the prosecutor initiated sentence adjustment, the bias hotline, the the measure to ban white supremacists from police affiliations, the Murdered Indigenous Women Implementation Office, and many other things were heard but rejected. Is it necessary for the Senate to have new hearings, or can they simply take care of this in conference committee?
Kevin, thank you for that question. I'll say this: I was pleased to hear that they wanted to open up hearings, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. They absolutely have the ability to add this language and add these things in conference committee. They have the ability to do that. I mean, they need to have the will to do that, but they absolutely have the ability to do that procedurally.
I'd like to follow up too, just kind of following up on what Mary said. I'm not familiar with the early warning system, or at least I don't know the details of it. And I wonder if there are measures that you think are high priority that were not included in Chair Mariani's and in the judiciary bill. If there's a high priority measure that's missing from those two bills that you want to see passed.
I think the
Chair.
language that I just mentioned regarding traffic stops, I think is incredibly important. And I think part of the reason that we're scheduling an informational hearing, even though it will be brought as an amendment to the omnibus bill, is so that the public can have an opportunity to weigh in and that folks have an opportunity to read that language and look at that language. But I think given the events of the last couple of days, I think that's absolutely should be one of the top things that we are considering as the omnibus bills move forward and as we confer in conference committee.
Vice Chair Fraser, can you follow up on that?
I think that's very well stated, that what Representative Jamie Becker-Finn said. There are some other community pieces, taking a look at qualified immunity, taking a look at a stronger look at personal liability insurance for officers. I think these are also things that we can continue to have conversations about. That, and we're also we're seeing around the nation that jurisdictions, cities are starting to take action and put things in place around this to build that trust and accountability between law enforcement and community. So I think those are things that we need to continue to have as part of the conversation.
Very quickly before I part, the early warning system, if I understand correctly, is basically looking for early warning signs in bad cops, essentially. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you go with that.
And next up, we have Stephen Montmayor.
Hi, good afternoon. This is sort of an open question, although I did see Representative Fraser, you had expressed this sentiment. I'm just curious, has House leadership or Governor Walz expressed to you that they share or plan to share the same insistence that you and several of your colleagues have expressed, that the passage of new police accountability legislation must come before any budget negotiations start this year?
I would say the House leadership and the governor have expressed their sense of urgency around these issues. We will continue to work together to make sure that we have a focus on making sure that we get some meaningful legislation passed. But I will say, yes, they absolutely understand the urgency that we have around these issues, and the reason why representatives have raised that we need to have a focus on passing those bills as we're moving through this process.
Thank you.
Next up, we have John Croman.
Hello, I missed the first 5 minutes of this. I've got it recorded, but I missed the first 5 minutes. So you may have gone through a list, kind of bullet points of some of the bills that are moving through the House that can't get any traction or hearings in the Senate. I noticed that the press release from the final version of the bill included things such as oversight councils, community organizations for crime prevention. We already mentioned the early warning system, and a bill that would prohibit peace officers from associating with white supremacists and hate groups. Is there anything else that made it through? Did implied immunity reform make it through? Qualified immunity reform make it through in any form?
That did not make it through, John. Thank you for that question. That one did not make it through.
Is the tracking of offenses or tracking of violations by law enforcement officers, would that be a publicly available database, or would it just be available to potential law enforcement agencies that are going to employ people?
Any offenses that would be considered public data would be available through the post board as it currently is. currently is now, if they have that data, or it absolutely would be available if it's public data, classified as public data through the local law enforcement agency. But if it's still classified as private data, that data would not be made public. It would only be available to the law enforcement agency so that they can take action and do analysis on that data to see where they can lead with training or other interventions.
I know there's an intersection between some of the second chance provisions of the bill and some of the law enforcement provisions, because a lot of people get caught up in the system and criminalized early in life for minor things, then it kind of snowballs. And that's kind of putting it very generally, but did you end up getting anything in the bill on codifying probation length, or going with I guess putting it in statute what the sentencing board did?
We do have, and any other members that are here that want to speak to this, but we do have some language in the bill that was authored by the Department of Corrections that deals with those pieces, and also incentives on how folks can earn early releases from programming from any sentences that they receive from the courts.
Thank you very much.
I think one other bill to mention is Representative Frazier's fines and fees reform bill. Mr. Wright's warrant was based on a failure to appear. And I think, we have been having broader discussions about the criminalization of poverty and how folks who maybe don't pay their fines or, don't show up to court then, get wrapped up further into the system and can lead to other outcomes that are not helpful to anybody in the community as well.
Thank you.
All right, last chance for questions here.
Thomas, if there's no question, I do want to add, I didn't add, there is one more bill or language we're going to bring forward during this time, and that's to deal with traffic enforcement cameras. The issue has come up before. It is something, and we have heard from law enforcement associations that officers spend a lot of time engaging with traffic enforcement infractions, and that is something where we think with technology we could limit those engagements, and officers can focus on things that actually require law enforcement to be engaged as opposed to traffic infractions. So we will be bringing language around that as well.
I'm seeing nothing else. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a great day. Thanks everyone.
Thank you all.